Representative Walsh, welcome back to Undivided.
Good to talk to you, Brandi.
I,
Boy, what a night it was last night.
I got to ask you, not to offend you, you're a little bit older than me. I couldn't even stay awake. How'd you stay awake?
I'm sort of accustomed to it. This period of about 10 days before the midpoint of each legislative section is kind of the hell week. It is 8 to 10 days of heavy floor actions, of floor debates, floor votes, and it usually goes for, I don't know, 12, 14, 16 hours a day. So I think I've become conditioned to it where I'm used to sleep deprivation and needing to stay sharp on the floor. There's also some caffeine.
Yeah, I saw some members drinking regular Coca-Cola, which I'll have to talk to them about because that's not very good for you.
Now,
Um,
I drink Cascade Ice, which is
Local
it's a
company.
local
Good for you.
caffeinated soda water brand that is a little bit better than some of the other stuff.
This segment brought to you by Cascade Ice.
There you go.
Right? But in all seriousness, I'm a skeptic, I think, by nature. That's part of the job, and I think you probably are as well a little bit. Is there any good reason or less nefarious reason why this particular bill had to wait until the last day of cutoff and be voted on at 2:30 a.m.?
To some degree, Brandy, it's a flex on the part of the speaker. The so-called 5 o'clock bill, which is the last bill of the before the big cutoff at the midpoint section of the session, is it is a statement that the Speaker of the House can make. And I think she was making a statement by holding this bill to be the so-called 5 o'clock bill, the last bill out of the Chamber of Origin period of the ledge session.
But what statement is
So
that?
that this is an important issue to her, maybe the most important issue of the session to her, repealing and gutting and undoing the Parents' Bill of Rights. There was also apparently a little bit of back and forth between the Democrats in the state House and the Democrats in the state Senate over whose version of the bill to gut the Parents' Bill of Rights would be the vehicle, as they call it, the version that would go to the governor's desk. And that's undetermined because both the Senate and the House passed out slightly different versions of bills to undo the Parents' Bill of Rights. Although the one that we voted on last night in the House ended up really being substantially similar to the one that the Senate voted out about a week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, we've seen some votes lately in the House. I mean, obviously, Democrats have this huge majority, so I don't think either of us anticipated this being voted down. They wouldn't have probably brought it to the floor otherwise. But it was every single Democrat. I guess there was a small part of me that was surprised that there weren't any Democrats who voted against it. Were you surprised?
Uh, yes, I was. I expected, as you saw in some of the votes on different amendments during the long floor debate, the speaker did let a few of her vulnerable members whose districts clearly do not agree with the far left lean of the majority of the Democrats in Olympia. She let a few of them vote with the Republicans on some of the amendments. But when it came to the final passage of the bill to gut the Parents' Bill of Rights, it looks like the speaker insisted all of her members vote to gut the Parents' Bill of Rights. And that is undoubtedly going to cost some of her vulnerable members who represent districts that are more purple than deep blue come next fall.
Well, one can only hope, right? So I know that this fight isn't over. We'll see which version, if any, make it to the governor's desk. And then, of course, there's an initiative on deck should they choose to go that route. Let's talk about the motor voter law. You're in court today?
Yes, I myself am not, but our lawyer representing the state party and many groups, including Republicans and non-Republican groups around the state, is in court down in Clark County in Vancouver today, and we're pursuing this case that involves to some degree the state's motor voter, that is the automatic voter registration program that we have in law in Washington State, but also a specific election from last year, a state Senate election down in Clark County that was decided by about 180 votes. And we found at least 500 votes cast in that election that were cast improperly. The people who voted no longer live in the district. And in Washington state, you have to live in the district where you're voting in order to vote legally. These were people, mostly people who had lived in the district earlier, but moved away, moved elsewhere, but still voted in that election in last November. That is illegal. Now, it's not the kind of thing people usually go to jail for doing, but it does call the result of that election into some question. And more to the point, Brandi, we're making a case for how poorly managed and maintained and updated the voter databases, the so-called voter rolls, are in the state of Washington. And we just found basically a smoking gun. There is no doubt that the voter database in that legislative race, the 18th legislative district, again, Clark County, Washington, the database is just not managed properly. There were too many people who'd moved away who were still listed as registered voters in that district.
Can I stop you for a sec, Jim, just so I'm not confused, because there's a couple issues at play there, right? So there's people who are voting in a district they no longer live in. I mean, that a city council member did that in Linwood and was voting in a district he didn't live in and representing a district he didn't live in, and nobody's doing anything about that. But so that's going on. And then, but how is that tied to the motor voter law?
Well, it's our argument that there are several practices that lead to this poorly maintained voter database status quo that we have in Washington. And one of them is the automatic voter registration. In Washington state, when you go to get a driver's license or even a non-driver's license ID card from the State Department of Licensing, you are automatically registered to vote at the address you're putting on your driver's license unless you affirmatively say, "Don't register me." We believe that is a bad practice. There's no due diligence done to make sure that that is in fact the address where you live. It's not like a temporary address for a kid at school or something. There is no due diligence done to make sure you're in fact a legal voter. You're a citizen who is allowed to vote. There's no quality control on that automatic voter registration. And we are arguing that that and a couple of other practices encourage and lead to these incorrect voter databases with people who are not properly able to vote, who are on the database as registered voters in a particular area. And the key thing here is, Brandi, because we're an all mail-in voting state, those databases are super important because we mail the ballots out to the names and addresses on the database. And if they're wrong, we're sending ballots out to the wrong people in the wrong places. And that's just a recipe for, well, not integrity or not enough integrity.
Yeah, what do you think happened with those 500? Because again, if you mail the ballot and they're not there, does the USPS forward it to their current address, or are you contending that people who lived in the places that those people used to live voted for them?
It's kind of all of the above. In some cases, the ballots it looks like, were forwarded to a person's new address. That's not supposed to happen, but we know that it does happen in many cases. And then in other cases, we don't know. It may have been someone else voted the ballot. In some cases, the people may have been wrongly on the database to begin with, and they aren't, in fact, legal voters. So we think it's a mix of different problems, but the main piece of it seems to be that ballots were forwarded improperly to people at their new addresses, and they voted them either knowingly or unknowingly, that to vote based on their old address where they don't live anymore is actually against the law.
Yeah. So what is the outcome that you're hoping for? Because I know that you guys have also asked the Trump administration and Attorney General Pam Bondi to review this sort of motor voter law here. But in terms of today's court hearing, in this case, what is the outcome that you want?
Well, we're asking for a couple of remedies. One would be we're asking the court to order a new election in the one that was affected by the 500 questionable ballots. If we can't get that, we at least want an acknowledgement from the court that this in fact happened. Because when we raise questions of election integrity in Washington state, we're often countered with this argument, prove there's a problem. So we think that in this race, we have a smoking gun. We have proof of a problem. And at least we want the court to acknowledge the problem. If they won't order a new election, we at least want an acknowledgement that this problem happened. And that way we can really, I think, get traction on some of our other requests for better election integrity. And yes, on a separate track, but related, we have asked the Trump administration in DC to look particularly into how Washington state implements the automatic voter registration, the so-called Motor Voter Act. And we believe that the implementation is even worse than it needs to be. Other states have the so-called motor voter registration programs, but the other states generally do some kind of checking, some kind of due diligence that the people being automatically registered are legal voters. Washington doesn't do it. And so we're asking the Trump administration and the Department of Justice, Attorney General Brandi, perhaps the FBI, to come and investigate, look into how Washington state does the motor voter automatic registration. And we believe there are problems in it, and there may be some federal laws being violated in terms of voting rights for people. And if so, we're asking them to take some action to kind of clean up how Washington does automatic voter registration.
Yeah, and really quick, just because we're out of time, but just so I don't misunderstand this issue, because it seems like there's a clear problem with it. You're basically, it's like Scout's honor. I'm like, I can vote, right? Because you have to sort of opt yourself out of being registered, which of course raises the question of someone who's not a legal citizen in this country. My understanding is, yes, if they choose to vote and they're not a legal citizen, that's a crime that they could be prosecuted for, but somebody would have to kind of flag it in order for there to be an inquiry, right? There's no automatic comparison against a database of citizens.
That is correct. There is no automatic due diligence in the system as we implement it here in Washington state. In theory, the state secretary of state should be the entity, the office doing that. They aren't. They're kind of pointing the fingers at the 39 county auditors who are the local authorities for elections. And so there's a lot of finger pointing going on between the county auditors and the state secretary of state. And what we're asking the Trump administration to do is we don't care. We just want clarity on who should be doing the quality control, making sure that people who are registered to vote are actually legal to vote and live where we think they live.
Makes sense, doesn't it? Representative Walsh, good job on the floor last night / this morning. You're always really great in your arguments for amendments, and there were some crazy moments we highlighted on the show today, but thanks for trying. I know you guys are outnumbered, but all you can do is try.
We're not giving up, Brandi. We're not giving up. We are going to keep pushing for better law and better policy. And kids, I mean, at the end of the day, the stuff about parents' rights is ultimately about schools being better at delivering good education to kids. That's what the end goal is.
Couldn't agree more. All right, Representative Walsh, thanks so much.
Good to talk to you.